What's happening, y'all? Corey Buschlen from Fantasy Stock Exchange bringing you guys the lineup recap for week 5 of fantasy football. As you guys know, every Monday I come on here and I chop it up with you guys, talk about the FanDuel winning lineup, the Sunday Million winner, and the Millie Maker contest on DraftKings, as well as recap some of my own lineups. And in this video today, I'll be recapping some of the lineups that were in those contests. Of course, if you guys want some of my advice, if you haven't checked out the website already, draftsharks.com, I write a weekly GPP lineup advice article for both FanDuel and for DraftKings. You guys can see some of my picks in there. Definitely hit on some this week, definitely missed on some this week. Overall, it was a big time fantasy points bonanza this week. I believe of all the 5 weeks so far of fantasy football, these were the highest scoring winning lineups for the Sunday Million and DraftKings Millie Maker contest. So without further ado, guys, we're going to get right into this. The FanDuel winning lineup, as you guys can see on the screen right now. And with this winning lineup, this is, I think, the 5th time so far in the 5 weeks that we've seen that the winning lineup did not have a run back. So as you guys can see in this lineup, it looks like his core stack that this guy was building out. Captain Insano, congrats to you on the $1 million. Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, and Mike Williams decided to stack that Chargers offense, get the main pieces there. Also differentiated getting away from Keenan Allen, which if you're going to pick Justin Herbert, a lot of people probably would have went Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. Getting the running back in there and the fact that he scored a receiving touchdown definitely helps you out with Austin Eckler. So he definitely built out that core stack really well. That Chargers and Browns game was massively high scoring, which definitely helped out Captain Insano as well. Got a nice value add at Tony Pollard at running back. Also added in some high ceiling wide receivers like Devontae Adams and Antonio Brown, who caught a lot of passes and some touchdowns in this game. Hunter Henry was a great add at tight end. Mike Evans also caught a lot of passes and some touchdowns in his game. Dallas Cowboys defense, again, overall, when you look at this slate, when you look at this week's fantasy production, there was just some monster performances from some people. So similar to week 2 is what I was talking about. If you didn't have some of those blowout performances in your lineup, Devontae Adams, Mike Williams, Antonio Brown, all these guys contributed. And of course, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, some of these other quarterbacks that had blowout performances. It was really hard for you to win any kind of tournament in general, but especially a big tournament like the Millie Maker or the Sunday Million, which Captain Insano ended up winning thanks to his lineup of 231 fantasy points. So moving to my lineups, obviously I'm nearly 100 fantasy points less, and I still was able to actually get into the money with both of my Sunday Million lineups. Now, in this first lineup, I actually kind of went with like a 0 RB build, and I didn't plan on this. I actually just did like Myles Gaskin and Tony Pollard this week as very low priced plays because most people, and rightfully so, were on Alex Madison and Leonard Fournette and Chuba Hubbard and some of the other lower priced options. So I decided to go about $1,000 salary lower than those guys and pick up some guys that I really liked, allowing me to build out my lineup and spend up at the other positions. As you can see, I got Kyler Murray into my lineup, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel. Some of these higher priced wide receivers were able to fit into my lineup. Now, unfortunately for me, my core stack in this lineup was Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins and a run back of Deebo Samuel. And this game produced 27 points. So that was definitely a big time L on my part. Had I stacked Justin Herbert and Mike Williams and ran it back with Nick Chubb or something, that would have been a much more suitable stack for my lineup. But game selection, again, continues to befuddle me. It's been a problem of mine so far this year. I haven't been able to pick the correct games, especially when I'm paying up, which I did for Kyler Murray in this lineup and DeAndre Hopkins as well. They had okay games, DeAndre Hopkins specifically, but Kyler Murray at the price that he was at definitely should have been a much bigger performance from him. You needed a 35, 40-point game based on the performances that we saw from Justin Herbert and from Tom Brady. So I'm starting to rethink paying up at quarterback because every time I've done it so far this year, hasn't worked out for me tremendously. But Jared Cook at tight end also was a big disappointment. But overall, this lineup wasn't bad. If this was a lower scoring fantasy week, if the winning lineup only had like 200 fantasy points instead of like the 230 that it had, then maybe I'm, in the top 50,000 of this contest and I win a little bit more money, but still was able to get my money back and then some in that lineup. Now moving on to my other FanDuel lineup in the Sunday Million contest. Again, you guys can see my core stack there. I just did Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams in this game. I didn't actually run it back with anybody other than Jamar Chase. I just did a simple Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase stack. And again, that actually was a good decision for the most part. Aaron Rodgers didn't have the highest ceiling game, but Devontae Adams and Jamar Chase definitely did. The issue is where I went wrong was going back to the well on Brandon Ayuk has not worked for me. I'm going to pretty much just give up on Brandon Ayuk. I thought because of George Kittle being out for this game, Brandon Ayuk will be low owned. He definitely was low owned, 2% ownership, but the fact that I keep going back to the well on Brandon Ayuk is definitely not an ideal situation there. I did have a lot of highly owned players in this lineup. Derrick Henry, Damian Williams, Devontae Adams, and Mike Gesicki were all pretty highly owned. They ended up performing well outside of Mike Gesicki, and that didn't really give me a whole lot of differentiation. Any place that I kind of went contrarian in pretty much, fell flat on my face. The Washington football team defense didn't have the greatest game. Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, those guys, I thought we're going to be in for a great game, but the Buccaneers defense definitely stiffened up and played a lot better than they'd been playing in recent weeks, and definitely held the Miami passing offense to pretty much nothing. And that affected Mike Gesicki and Jalen Waddle directly. So those were my lineups. Again, I think the biggest problem for me this week was game selection, as it's been for a couple weeks now. I think 2 out of 5 weeks so far, game selection has really been an issue for me. I've thought certain games were going to be high scoring, like the Packers and Bengals game, which, I mean, it was kind of high scoring. 47 points isn't the worst in the world, but when there's an 82 point game on the slate, you're definitely going to take it on the chin if you didn't stack that game. So moving from FanDuel to DraftKings, as you guys know, I always recap the Millie Maker on DraftKings as well. On DraftKings, you guys can see the Millie Maker winner scored a whopping 260 fantasy points. Again, if you didn't have some of these high ceiling players, it was really hard for you to cash out on DraftKings. And if you had busts in your lineup, it was even harder because the scoring was fast and furious in this game. As you guys can see, this guy's core stack, perfection. Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown. That netted him like over 115 fantasy points between those 3 players. So definitely a great stack for that guy. Didn't choose to run it back with anybody. And again, no run backs. We saw a lot last year that a lot of people were winning these contests with 3 stacks and run backs and things of that nature. But so far this year, we haven't seen anybody win the Millie Maker or the Sunday Million with a 3 stack with a quarterback, a wide receiver, and a wide receiver, or 2 pass catchers or something like that, and a run back on the other side. It's mainly just been these mini stacks, these quarterback and 1 wide receiver with 1 run back, or it's been quarterback, wide receiver, like you guys see here. Chuba Hubbard and Alex Madison, both great value adds at running back. I'm kind of surprised that Chuba Hubbard was as low owned as he was, because he was relatively cheap relative to the production that you were expecting to get out of him with Christian McCaffrey out for this game. Alex Madison, of course, was very highly owned. 5,500 for that much production and that much volume was definitely going to be a big time production spike for your lineups. And as you guys can see, he just filled out his lineup with some great picks. Kadarius Toney at 11.3% owned. Another great pick. I did actually use Kadarius Toney in one of my cash game lineups, so that helped me out a lot. But overall, looking at N Corner's lineup here, looks like he built out a pretty good stack and just made some picks all around that worked out for him. So congrats to him. Congrats on the $1 million. I, unfortunately, on DraftKings, the one DraftKings Millie Maker lineup that I did was not so lucky. And the big contributing factor for this unluckiness was obviously the fact that I chose to triple stack the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, which admittedly was a contrarian play. Trevor Lawrence, 4.2% owned. Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones, however, were not under-owned players, 10.5% and 17.6%. I didn't think that somebody was going to stack these guys together. So I thought if Trevor Lawrence had a big game in this one, the Tennessee Titans were just completely horrid at defending the pass up until this game. Jacksonville chose to go in other directions with their passing game. They didn't throw to Marvin Jones or Laviska Shenault a whole lot, but Trevor Lawrence did, pay off for me. If I would have played a naked Trevor Lawrence and paid up some other places, then I probably would have been in much better shape. Another big, obvious contributing factor for the fact that this lineup didn't cash anything was Saquon Barkley going out with injury after only performing with 0.9 fantasy points. So obviously, when you have a player like that you spent up for, go with an injury and be out for the rest of the game, it's going to be pretty hard to cash in your lineup. But I mean, overall, I did make some good picks with Derrick Henry, Antonio Brown, Alex Madison, and Trevor Lawrence, but it's pretty hard to cash a lineup where one of your main running backs goes out with an injury. So that was my week in DFS. That was the Millie Maker and Sunday Million winners. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you guys want my DFS lineup advice or some of the other lineup advice that we have on the Draft Sharks website, you guys can go to draftsharks.com and become a member there. Of course, hit the subscribe, the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below on this video, and I'll talk to you guys next time.